How's that?
Picture perfect.
All right, Robbie.
My first question is, what's your earliest memory of creating art? Painting, drawing?
Oh, I can't remember a time when I didn't like to draw. In fact, I remember when I was really small at school, they had a book called Bobby Likes to Draw, and I was really jealous of the kid. It bothered me that there was another Bobby that liked to draw because I thought that was my thing. So that goes way back.
So
5 years, 6 years old. I was probably in first grade, and I remember very clearly that I thought drawing was my thing, and it bugged me that there was another kid. Plus, he had my name, so I had to be 6 years old. But I'm sure I was drawing before that. You just do it, you know.
Next one, what advice would you give to someone just starting out as a painter or a sculptor?
I would tell them just to do it. Everything around a person that starts is going to be non-supportive in the sense that it's not going to make sense to a lot of people. Your family, your friends, your relatives. There aren't going to be a lot of people saying, "Whoa, what a great idea. You should spend all your time on that and let me see your progress. I'm really interested in it." That's just not going to happen, but it shouldn't make any difference. Don't let other people's value system, I guess is the right word, affect what's important to you. Just do whatever it is that you have an impulse to do. Do as much of it as you can, whenever you can. Whether you have another job, whether you have other things you're responsible for, any free time that you have, put into whatever it is that you love to do. That would be my advice.
All right, I'm going to stop there. I have more questions, but
How do you decide?
thanks for listening, guys. Next question, first piece of art that really moved or inspired you?
Oh, that's a good question. The one that made me start doing art in the way I did was the psychedelic movement. The Beatles sort of pioneered the whole psychedelic / music / visual art / fashion, and they made a cartoon called Yellow Submarine.
Mm-hmm.
And they used these German illustrators, and I had never seen anything like it before. And at the same time, there was a guy named Peter Max. So late 60s, there was this explosion of really brightly colored design that would pop right off the page at your movie or clothing. And so that was a huge influence. I experimented with painting on clothes. I did a mural at a teacher's house that I had, and it was all in that same real bright, loud, psychedelic color style. So I would say that was where I probably right there around the age of 13, 14, I took a definite turn in the way I work.
Next question, how did your environment growing up impact your creativity, family, community?
Very negatively. Because when in the 60s and the 50s before that, the notion of getting involved in the arts was just obscure. Nobody did it. I mean, I knew kids that were really gifted, for example, in music, and they just were really, really discouraged. We played together, but the guys that really had a gift weren't acknowledged by. It just wasn't a thing you did. You know, you were going to be a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant, an engineer. Those were acceptable professions. But if you went, in fact, I didn't even know any. There was a guy across the street from me when I was little who was apparently a concert violinist. but he was an alcoholic and made his living as a milkman. So that was kind of the backdrop. You did not think seriously or take seriously the notion of being a painter or musician or writer or any of the creative arts. It was very, very, it wasn't actively discouraged, but there was zero encouragement. And so how that affected me was I never took it seriously. I thought of it as just something that was going to be irrelevant to being an adult.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Okay.
What's been your biggest challenge as an artist?
All the time I took off from it.
Hmm.
I mean, I was, well, two challenges. First of all, when I got into college, I recognized that most of the kids, it was like sports. If you wanted to play football in college and you had never played it in high school or grammar school, you'd be in bad shape. So I never realized how unschooled I was until I was in this 101 painting class, and I'm looking around and all these kids are. The first assignment was look out the window and paint what you see. And I'm looking around, these kids are painting these beautiful landscapes with depth and, you know, and mine looked like an 11-year-old, you know, with tempera paints. It was really embarrassing. And then I gradually got sort of comfortable with the medium, but I still never got the 101 stuff. Color study, painting, perspective, shading, depth, all those things that are the elements of painting. But I found a way to paint, and then I stopped. And for 35 years, I was in the business world. More than 35 years. And occasionally, I would do something like that mural I was talking about in one color. Or I would do a small drawing for somebody but in general, I stopped. And so all of a sudden, all those years later, I went back to painting and sculpture, and I felt the lack of practice and the lack of prep. So I had to relearn a lot of things, and it frustrates me even now that if I'm doing a painting and I'm trying to get this to look like it's in front of that, or this to be darker than that it's hard. It takes me a lot of extra time, where somebody that was doing it for the last 30 or 35 years that would just be in their skill set. So that's the biggest challenge. But I found a way to paint, and then I stopped. And for 35 years, I was in the business world. More than 35 years. And occasionally, I would do something like that mural I was talking about in one color. Or I would do a small drawing for somebody but in general, I stopped. And so all of a sudden, all those years later, I went back to painting and sculpture, and I felt the lack of practice and the lack of prep. So I had to relearn a lot of things, and it frustrates me even now that if I'm doing a painting and I'm trying to get this to look like it's in front of that, or this to be darker than that it's hard. It takes me a lot of extra time, where somebody that was doing it for the last 30 or 35 years would just be in their skill set. So that's the biggest challenge.
Just off the cuff, but you got my mind going. Especially for musicians, and I guess for every artist, there's like a big element, maybe more so than ever, of like commercialization of art, especially for artists, like getting on Instagram, getting on YouTube, getting your music on the internet and heard by lots of people. What do you think about the crossroads of like commercializing your art, and how does that relate to the art itself?
Well, I think the impulse comes from wanting to be recognized or have someone else tell you that what you're doing is worth it. And so the scale is where the question lies. Is it enough to get the satisfaction of your best friend who believes in you, say you're really onto something, your friends, your family? So the next level is getting recognition from strangers. And then it's a question of how much value fame and recognition and expanding your audience, how important is that to you versus doing what your vision tells you? The tension is always, you don't want to just write a book and put it in a drawer knowing that it was just terrific writing. You don't want to, write a song that you play for your relatives at Christmas and they tell you that it's terrific. But as soon as you start being conscious of what people like, or, people seem to like it when I use a falsetto. Let me see if I can work that into my next song. Or people seem to like books about nautical themes, so maybe I could write. As soon as you start trying to modify or shape or structure your work into a formula that you think will maximize, then it's just a few steps away from hit singer doing the same song over and over again because it sells 1 million copies. Or I talked there earlier about that artist Peter Max. When he started, what he was doing was revolutionary. Nobody's stuff looked like his, and then it became a brand. It was on clothes. He made eyeglass frames. Little by little, his work just became ridiculous. He made a fortune. So there's always that tension. You're never going to be happy. You're never going to be acknowledged, satisfied, fulfilled by just saying to yourself, "Oh, this is the best thing I ever did." And you're always going to be suspicious that the people that love you and are close to you are kind of being gentle. But as soon as you step out into that wider arena, you become, okay, well, what's the best way to get this out there? What's likely to increase my appeal? Then it gets a little bit dicey because the push and pull between, and you see this all the time. You see it in this is the last thing I'll say because it's unrelated directly to art, but I notice this a lot in personalities, people that become famous for an identity, a comedian or a talk show host, somebody that's known for their wit, originality, way of thinking. As their audience gets wider, they start to notice that there's a certain thing that sells to a bigger group. Whether it's pretending that, women are a pain in the neck, or being Italian is your selling point, make funny jokes. Pretty soon they become a shtick, a one-act pony, and their audience and their compensation grows and grows and grows from people that really like that and really reward it. But it's not what made them good in the first place.
So diffuses their authenticity.
Yeah, I think as soon as you begin to blur that line between approval and working for it and remembering why you started this, because I think any kid that picks up a pencil or picks up a guitar or, writes their first, is doing it because of an impulse to express themselves. If that begins to be adulterated or polluted by self-consciousness, you can just see it happen. You can see guys start to work the crowd, and then I don't know. When you read about these lives of people that were really dedicated to whatever they did, they work at it. They don't work at it looking in a mirror. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this stuff.